So welcome everybody back to Veil of Sound. It's Video Interview Sunday and we got another guest from the States with us. I'm very glad to have Thomas Brenneman here on the show. Thomas, thanks for being here.
Yeah, of course, man. I really appreciate you having us on. Excited.
Definitely. I mean, we're always looking for good post-rock bands, and one doesn't get around still motions over the last couple of years. So that's definitely an honor for us to have you here. So first of all, Thomas, I gotta ask that. German roots?
Yeah, actually, yeah. Brenneman is German. Yeah, so German, Irish, Scottish.
So when did your ancestors leave the old world? Last century or even before?
I would say probably 1800s, like early 1800s. I'm pretty sure they left Germany and kind of like made their way over to the States. We've been in this, I mean, the roots in the States have been here for a long time. So yeah, I would say probably about 18th century.
Wow, that is crazy. So, but other than that, do you feel in any way connected to the old world, or do you feel like 100% Arizona guy?
Yeah. No, I mean, I've never even been to Europe. I've never been to Europe. So that is
so for everybody at Dunk Festival, that needs to be changed.
Exactly. That is the goal. That is the goal. So, yeah, definitely. I mean, I have, I just don't even have like an idea of what that even looks like, as far as like the old world and my German roots. I have no idea. I grew up in Washington, D.C. So grew up
the crime capital of the world.
Exactly. So I grew up just outside of Washington, D.C. and moved out to Phoenix, Arizona when I was about 10. So it's been almost 25 years now that I've been in Phoenix. So I consider myself like a true Arizonan, a true Phoenician. So
I usually always ask the people that I interview where I'm catching them at that very moment, but with the background behind you, it's pretty clear that you are in somewhat of an office / rehearsal spot / music room, right?
Yes, this is like my home office, home studio, my home like recording studio. So this is where all the behind the scenes work goes into writing the still motions music. So this isn't our practice space. We have a practice space a few miles down the road from here. But this is where all the magic happens, if you will.
So then basically also all the band members live close by.
Yeah, currently, yeah.
And I guess that was also one of the good things over the last 2 years, so that at least you didn't have to do a lot of file sharing online, right?
So actually, the funny thing is that the way we wrote the new record was literally virtual. We just wrote it completely virtual. It was all file sharing back and forth. For the most part, we had a few sessions where Chris, our other guitar player, would come over here and we'd record together here. But most of it was written completely virtual. And then, really the first time we had played it all together was in the studio recording the record.
Wow. So then that also answers in some ways my next question. I would have asked that, how did you get through the pandemic? Did you stay on your own or did you try to mingle as much as possible?
Really for me, it was, obviously there was a period of time where everybody was kind of like locked down here.
Yeah.
After that initial like lockdown phase, we were kind of back to practicing as soon as we felt comfortable to like get back in a room together and start practicing again. And like we recorded the record kind of in the middle of the pandemic too, so we were in the studio recording. And ultimately, yeah, I mean, there was definitely a period of time where we were definitely like separated and remaining kind of in that lockdown mode. But for the most part, I mean, I tried to get out and mingle, and you know, as long as I could be safe and get out and mingle, I just don't think it's like it's healthy to be like just completely locked down by yourself in seclusion. You know, I've got my wife here, obviously, but like. You got to get outside. You got to go do stuff. You know.
Definitely. Definitely. I know we live close by the forest, so that was also like an escape for us. I can
Oh, that's
totally
awesome.
understand what you mean.
Yeah.
So let's get to the new record, to
Yeah.
Synthesis. What have the reactions so far been like? Everybody that I talked to was in love with it.
Yeah, the reactions have been really good, really good. We've gotten a lot of great, you know, a lot of great feedback from, you know, different blogs, different media outlets. There's been a lot of really solid feedback. When we did the premiere via Where Post Rock Dwells, there was a great, you know, sense of community in that premiere, and everybody was loving it. So yeah, I mean, it's been really good feedback. Definitely seems to have, you know, we tried to. I mean, Mirrors was our first record, and like my thing is like I always wanna expand. I always wanna grow on it, and like, you know, the next record be better, the next record be better, the next record be better. And I feel like we accomplished that with Synthesis for sure.
Definitely, definitely. One feels that you have grown as a band and also as individual musicians. That is totally clear. What I always like to ask people who play instrumental music is how do you deal with the fact that your music is voiceless?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good question. I mean, ultimately, yeah, it comes down to, for me, it comes down to two things really. It comes down to um, a strong melody. You know, still the music has to have a sense of melody, right? Whether that's vocals or whether that's an
Definitely,
instrumental, right?
definitely.
So that's just it really comes down to I'm always trying to search for that like hook melody, you know, to really just hold down that track. Whether that's, you know, on guitar or whether that's on piano or whatever that may be. And then the other sense is just you know, I would say it comes down to uh, dynamics, right? Like the dynamics of the music and like how that comes across and how that presents like the emotion behind the music, you know? I think those two things are like the most important when it comes to instrumental music, really.
Yeah. Do you think that Still Motions has a certain kind of narrative instrument? I give you an example. With Pelican, I always feel as if the drums are telling the story. With
Yeah.
Caspian, it's always the guitars. Do you feel as if Still Motions also has one of those narrative instruments?
I mean, just coming from obviously I'm a guitar player and I play piano too, and we've been trying to institute more piano into the music to kind of help create that melody or help just reinstitute that melody. Like even if the guitar and the piano are doing the same thing, it just makes it sound bigger, right?
Of course.
So that's the way I look at it. As far as a guitar player, I'm trying to create that melody and create that storyline. Now, ultimately, though, the way I've kind of approached Still Motions from the beginning was that I wanted like every instrument to have its own place, right? So I wanted
Also
the
its own
guitars to have,
space?
yeah, its own space, but also like to be able to tell its own story, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like a lot of times you hear, you know, the guitars are doing two completely separate different melodies, right? They're playing off of each other, but it's kind of combining into, you know, this sense of like, you know, tugging and pulling each other. So yeah, I mean, ultimately, my main goal has always been to like have each individual instrument have its own storyline, like within that track. So again, yeah, I mean, I would say that the guitar, coming from a guitarist's mindset, the guitar is kind of that main story, I guess, that main storyline. But overall, when I listen back to it, it's like the drums play a huge part in that story, the guitar plays a huge part in that story, the bass plays a huge part in that story.
So would you then say that you don't have one narrator, but more of a dialogue in your music?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of how I look at it. I mean, essentially, too, going back, I mean, it's just certain individual songs, right? Like, if you listen to Mirrors off of Mirrors, or if you listen to Synthesis off the new record, so like the two title tracks, ultimately, you can listen to that and you can distinctly hear the guitars are doing two completely separate different things on both of those tracks, right, throughout. So it's like you have these two, these two voices kind of going back and forth and pulling at each other, but then the drums are very like present too, and like they're doing their own thing, and the bass is like holding it down as well. So yeah, I kind of look at it as more of like an overall dialogue, really.
So let's go into some of the themes or topics of synthesis. I have to ask that, because when looking at some of your track titles, that question basically comes up, and it spans over two records by now. You had Epiphany on the first one, you had Hope and Lasting Bloom, and now you also have Agnosia on this last record. So, I mean, like Agnosia and Epiphany, those are clearly words with a religious connotation, and Hope and Lasting Bloom, to me at least, also plays into that. Do you consider yourself, let's say, a religious person?
It's funny because no, like I never grew up with religion, like as a an upbringing. I don't consider myself very religious now. I would say like spiritual, but not religious, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course it makes sense, because I mean, like, your track is basically called Agnosia, so
Yeah.
it sounds as if, like, agnostics usually acknowledge the fact that there is no higher being.
Yeah.
That's also
Yeah.
something that I just thought of. Like.
Yeah. Yeah.
When
I mean,
you say
ultimately,
spirituality, you first. You go first, please.
yeah. Again, like I think, I was kind of going through during Mirrors, like when we were in the process of writing Mirrors, I just kind of had, I guess, a little bit of like my own spirit, like awakening, and it doesn't really stem from religion. I wouldn't say we're just like, just believing in a higher spirit, whatever that may be. But it's, not to get too deep into it, but I did go through kind of like my own spiritual awakening during that record process, and it's just kind of continued over, obviously. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely some like spirituality tied into the themes of the music, but yeah, I wouldn't say religion. I've never been a very religious person by any means.
Which I can totally understand. So probably it's more like this spirituality that a lot of us feel when also connected to beautiful places like Arizona,
100.
your own surroundings. Does that play into your music as well?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think I would say so. I think ultimately, like, I feel like actually in general, like post rock just has like a very like a close tie. I mean, you see like a lot of artwork that's like associated with post rock music, and it's like beautiful scenery, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like the two just kind of go hand in hand with each other. But yeah, I would say that the spirituality, I mean, you can, we've got some beautiful scenery here in Arizona. If you go up north to Sedona is like an extremely spiritual place and like very spiritual community. And yeah, I mean, I think definitely like the two definitely can go hand in hand with each other.
I also always, maybe that's also just an association because I know that you're from Arizona, but very often I have like a feeling of listening to music that has been produced and recorded in wide spaces, or at least played in a way that it's very widespreading. The sound of it is always very big in a way. How do you go about creating that? How long does it take for you to create that in a small studio?
Just like that space, that overall space.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ultimately from an engineering standpoint. it's not super difficult. I mean, ultimately, there's ways to kind of, sure, you could go record in a very large space, right? Like you've got bands like, tours where they're recording in a cavern or like out in the forest, and like that stuff's amazing. It's really cool because it does really provide that really unique sound. So I mean, you can tell the difference between something that's obviously recorded in a cavern versus something that's recorded in a small studio space. But again, with a lot of post rock, again, like reverb just kind of falls into that overall, post rock sound, to where it's just really created by that reverb on the guitar. But there's also, we'll set up room mics in the studio. So you've got a mic directly on the amp, but then 20, 30 feet away, you have a group of mics catching the sound on the other end of the room to help create that space.
But you don't record your own music, right? You didn't record your own stuff.
I didn't. No, we record all of the demos and the pre-production work, but I would never feel comfortable recording my own product. It would, first off, like, I went to school for audio engineering, and like I understand it.
That's why I ask.
Yeah, and like I'm like, I consider myself like to be fairly good at it, but I would just never get a record done. I would never finish it. It would never be completed because it would just, I'd always continue working at it and trying to make it better. So I have a buddy here in Phoenix named Corey Spots, who is a phenomenal engineer. He's actually who taught me when I was going to school for audio engineering. He's a teacher at one of the colleges here and teaches audio engineering. And we record with him. And he's phenomenal. He's the best here in Arizona, and he's got a great studio, great equipment, and he's amazing to work with. He does a really, really great job. So he's done the 2 full still motions records,
which are phenomenal. We have to say that once again. When listening to it, I also very often have a feeling of, let's say, audio independence. It doesn't sound as if you try to follow anyone's leads, anyone's footsteps. But of course, I mean, like, there surely have been influences on your own writing. Who would you name as the influences on your writing?
Yeah, I mean, I would say definitely. I mean, we always kind of try and create our own thing, and that's obviously the goal. But yeah, I mean, influence definitely always plays into creation, right? I mean, whether you're an artist or whether you're a musician, there's always going to be some semblance of influence in that work. I'm a huge fan of Caspian. I love Caspian. They're one of my all-time favorites. Really big fan of Tides of Man. Ultimately, This Will Destroy You is kind of like was my introduction into post-rock years ago, and that always kind of plays a presence in some of their older stuff. I would say those are kind of like the main influences for me. But now there's so many great bands, especially over in Europe. I mean, you guys just like, post-rock is very young in the States compared to Europe, and like,
yeah.
There's phenomenal music coming out of Europe right now. It's really, really cool to see.
Definitely. I mean, like, I can totally support that, and I still remember that I first heard Mogwai like 22, 23 years ago, and I mean, like, they have now been there for such a long time. But coming back,
I'm a big fan of them as well.
Yeah. Although I gotta say that they make a hell of a noise during their concerts, but that is also cool. So you've already mentioned the record covers for a lot of post-rock bands, and you've mentioned that, of course, and that's true. We very often have pictures and photos from outside locations. But yours are different.
Yeah.
I mean, like, there is always, it seems, some kind of graphic element in the middle.
Yeah.
And it's always it seems as if they're both reaching upwards. Is this placing similarity intentional? Because on mirrors you had those rings that were in the middle, and now on synthesis you also have some kind of rings and layers, but they're both in the middle of a record.
Yeah. Honestly, unintentional. It was unintentional. Mirrors, we worked with a graphic design artist called Flesh and Bone Design. That's located here in the States. He actually works with he's worked with a lot of the bands in the post-rock community.
Mm-hmm.
I've just always loved his design work, and I went to him just very open-minded and was like, hey, here's the name of the record, here's the theme of the record, just go for it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And like, it was cool. We just like shot ideas back and forth, and that's kind of what came up. But it is, I guess you could say it's upward reaching, but it is, if you look at the artwork for Mirrors, it completely mirrors each other. So like, it's 100% the same all the way around, no matter how you look at it, right? So that was just kind of the overall intention of that. The new record, we worked with Christopher Royal King, who, you know, he's from This Will Destroy You. He does graphic design as well. And he just does like really kind of abstract, you know, just very different, just abstract work. And a lot of it's like photography that he then takes and just manipulates. And I thought that was really cool. You know, and we went through a bunch of different images, and ultimately that was the one that we ended up choosing. But it did just kind of feel like it kind of went along with the theme of the record. I don't know. It just kind of, just looking at it, it just made me feel kind of uncomfortable. I don't know why. I don't know how to explain it, but looking at it, it just made me feel kind of uncomfortable. It's kind of glitchy. And then like we just added that logo on top of it that he created. But yeah, there wasn't really any real connotation between the two, honestly. It's just, I'm always looking for cool visuals, and like, I just don't want to settle on that, like, again, going back to like the scenery or something like that. You know, it's just overused, not even just in post-rock, it's overused by, you know, really all sorts of different genres. And yeah, I just think the package needs to be just as strong as the music, or stronger than the music, right? The visual needs to be just as strong, and that's just kind of always something that I'm thinking about.
Yeah. It also seems, if I looked at some of your pictures correctly, it seems as if Mirrors means a lot to you, because if I remember correctly, you have it tattooed on your arm, right?
Yeah, right there. It's the logo.
So next up must be the other arm with.
Unfortunately, I don't have much room on the other arm.
Yeah, it must be a small one. It must be small.
But we got space on this one, so we could throw it on.
There's a lot of space for a lot of records.
Yeah, exactly.
And in between those two records, you also had a one-off single called Sonder. Mm-hmm. Which I guess you didn't choose it because it has a certain connotation in German, meaning something like special or outlier. But you also have a guitar company called Sonder Guitars. Yeah. Who have been your most prominent buyers by now?
You know, I
know you did one for Clint from Onus.
Yeah, he's receiving it today, actually. So it's being delivered to him today. Really excited about that guitar. He came to me with a really cool, you know, idea. Just like the aesthetics of the guitar were, you know, really cool, and it turned out amazing. So excited about that one. Last year I built a guitar for Spencer from Tides of Man. Okay. So was excited about that. They were getting ready to start working on a new record, and he was mainly going to be playing baritone, and so I built him a baritone guitar. Those are, I mean, I've built a lot of guitars, and a lot of it has, you know, been for friends or for, you know, just random people that find me on online and or see my work on Instagram or anything like that. But I would say, Spencer from Tides of Man and and I mean Clint for sure too from Onus was really
What I
excited to
like
build.
about your guitars is that they always have a certain classical look.
Yeah.
Is that also, I mean, like I seen the baby blue baby behind you. Is that also some look that you prefer for your own guitars that you play?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I kind of just wanted to build guitars that's how I got started, honestly. Like, I used to be sponsored by a guitar company, and I played their guitars, and, great guitars, really awesome stuff. But I had just a specific, a specific idea of like what I wanted to be playing, and I started messing around with building my own, and then it just kind of expanded from there, solely just started playing the guitars that I was building for myself. And I definitely do have kind of that, I like the more classic looks, a lot of like the Fender Jazzmaster stuff or, some of the Gibson design. So I just kind of play off of that.
But then I saw that you also sometimes add some really cool features. I saw that one of your guitars that you built has had that classical, I forgot the name, electrical audio, metal neck.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That one was a custom build, like a custom build for somebody located here in Phoenix, or well, he's actually north. He's in Flagstaff, Arizona, which is about two hours north. Plays in a really cool band called Flowers. They're kind of very Holy Fawn sounding, really cool stuff.
Which is not a bad thing, bad thing.
Not at all. But yeah, he wanted like a classic, just Jazzmaster style guitar, but with an aluminum neck. So we ended up, just grabbing one of those electrical guitar, just full blown aluminum necks, and threw it on there, and that thing was really, really cool sounding. Definitely pretty unique.
Would you consider yourself a gear freak?
Yes.
Honest answer. Honest answer.
I would say I've kind of dialed it back. I'm not as much of a gear freak as I used to be. Up until probably the last like 2 years, my pedal board changed on a weekly basis. It was completely different every week. I had a different guitar every week. It was just like, it was a mess. But now I've definitely dialed it back. It's low for years now, much. And I recently built myself a new guitar, but that thing's going to stick around for a long time. So,
okay. And I guess that also influences your newest stuff, right? So that with a change of guitar, with a change of gear, with a change of pedal board, but also changes in a way not only the sound of your writing, but also probably the approach to your writing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing that I haven't changed in a very long time is my amp, my amplifier, which is, I'm super lucky to be sponsored by a really phenomenal amp company here in the States. And
you can just name them, don't worry.
They're Bad Cat amps. They're they've been around for a long time, but it was kind of my dream amp, and I ended up getting a deal with them, and so have been playing with that same amp for a long time now, and that is definitely part of like the Still Motion sound. I think it's just a really unique sounding amplifier, and it's just phenomenal. So that's obviously kind of like the backbone of our sound. But yeah, I mean, the guitars are kind of always changing. The pedals will, change in and out. So yeah, I mean, it definitely, each record kind of, it's funny because, even so, like, we record everything prior to actually going into the studio to like record the final record. But even so, once we get into the studio and record, everything starts changing. Everything's like ever changing. So, I mean, we may come out of the studio with the record sounding completely different than it did going into the studio, So just different influences. You have different gear available maybe in the studio that you don't have at home. And then, stuff gets thrown into the pile, and yeah. It's always fun. Just experimentation.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but in a way, Still Motions is your baby, right? Is you started the project.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. So
I started.
do you also write the stuff yourself, or is it now a collective songwriting process?
Now it's very much a collective songwriting process. Mirrors as a whole. So before we released Mirrors, we had the 2 singles, right? We had Where You Found Me and then Through Doubt Comes Clarity. And those ended up being on Mirrors. Those were the first 2 tracks I wrote. I wrote by myself, and Chris Julian, our drummer, had already kind of joined in at that time. So he played drums on that, but I played all the other instruments on those 2 tracks. And then the rest of the record was pretty much written fully by me and Chris Julian, the drummer. So it was just the 2 of us at that time. Synthesis was like written as a whole, like everybody, like we all wrote it together. So it was definitely a nice experience, because it took, I don't know, man. When I wrote Mirrors, it was an awesome experience, because again, it was like the first release. This was my baby, but I just put a lot of stress onto myself about trying to like write everything myself. And this record was just a much more like fluid process, and everybody's hands were all in, and just having that help and other influence, outside influence, was definitely really, really nice.
And it also takes a lot of pressure from you, right? So it's not that it all depends on you. And
yeah,
then,
I mean, I guess it shouldn't be pressure, right? Like I never want to say that it's like, oh man, it's so much pressure to like write this music. And like a lot of the times, we just write the music and it's there. But then with the second record, then there's like an expectation of you to like, to make better, make a better record on the second record than your first. And the pressure kind of started to weigh on me at that point. And I don't know. It was definitely really nice to have all of that, just like the full joint effort of the whole band at this point to come in and help out. So
yeah, I mean, like, what do they say? You got 20 years for your first record, but only 20 months for the second one.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So now that the record is already out, what is going to happen with Still Motions in the next couple of months? Where can people catch you?
Yeah, so I mean, ultimately, we're looking at starting to play more live shows. Hopefully, doing some small date runs of like little mini tours, probably beginning of next year. And then hopefully we're playing. I know there's talks with our label Post Recordings right now of doing Post Fest next year, and then fingers crossed maybe Dunk Fest too. We'll see. And if we do that, if we do Dunk, we're gonna come out and probably do like a European tour as well, because it would just make sense at that point. So definitely, I mean, we're just kind of our drummer had a baby. Kind of late last year and fed over to the beginning of this year. And so we kind of laid low, and COVID was still kind of, an issue as far as venues being open and shows being able to be booked and stuff. But we're looking forward to everything kind of reopen now and being able to get out there and start playing some more live shows. Because we've only played one show. We've only played one live show.
Yeah, because, I mean, like, Mirrors came out, I don't know if it was already in the pandemic or shortly before. So it was like,
the
pandemic cut you short.
Exactly. Yeah. So Mirrors released on May 1st, 2020, and we had our first show scheduled for that night. So it was like a record release show. It was a sold out show, and ultimately the pandemic had kind of hit at that point, but nothing had been shut down yet as far as like venues go. So we ended up getting the word about 5 days before the show that they weren't going to be able to do it, so it ended up getting canceled. We did a couple of live stream events during the pandemic, and that was
Didn't
cool.
you do one with postponed series?
Yeah, we did the postponed series. We did another one with a local venue here in town that ended up doing their own live stream series as well. And then we kind of did our own little live performances here and there. But we had our first show last October. Our first like real live set last October. So definitely looking
already again in July.
Man. I know, it's crazy. It's crazy. So definitely looking to get back out there though and start playing some more for sure.
Last question before we get to our infamous quickfire round. I know that you like to work. I don't want to say workaholic, but I know that you like to work. Are you already writing new stuff?
Yes.
That's what everybody wanted to hear. So,
I'll be really quick. To be honest, we had, so we started writing Synthesis like right at the beginning of the pandemic, right? So it was like literally right after Mirrors released, we started writing Synthesis.
And Van already as a collective?
What's that?
Van already as like a complete band?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So we started writing that. Within the first like 3 months of writing, we had about 20 songs done.
Ooh.
So now a lot of that, obviously 6 of those songs are on Synthesis. Another 6 are geared already for the next record. So like we're going to be recording the next record very soon here. And it's ultimately Synthesis was like part 1 of 2. So it's like it's this next record ultimately I'm not going to go too deep into it, but it's kind of a continuation of the theme of Synthesis on like the reverse side of it. So it's antithesis. Yeah, exactly.
And I hope I didn't catch that one, but that's really awesome to hear, Thomas. That's really awesome to hear, because I know that there are lots of people out there who cannot wait for more music, although we only got a really, really great record a few weeks ago. Great to hear. But then if you already have like the opposite of Synthesis and you say you're still writing, that means that you must have already plans for record number 4.
Yeah.
Amazing.
We've got a lot of music backed up right now. So who knows if it'll all see the light of day? It may not. The 4th record may be like all new music that we just focus on down the road. But record 3 is written. It's done. It's not recorded yet. Yeah. It is recorded, but just demos. So we'll be going into the studio later this year or early next year to record album number 3.
But then let me ask it that way before we come to the other questions. Now that the pandemic is cutting us a little bit of slack, things are going back to normal. We are not 100% back to normal life, but I think that, you know what I mean. We're closing in on that. Do you now feel a different kind of vibe when writing stuff with still motions than during the pandemic?
I don't know. It's going to be interesting because Mirrors was written outside of the pandemic. Like it was written before the pandemic, and it was very much I mean, the reason it was called Mirrors was it was just an ultimate like reflection of a bunch of different periods of time in my life. So each song kind of told its own story of like a different period of time within my life, that like big moments in my life. Synthesis was very much a reflection on the current times. Like it was very much a reflection on the pandemic, everything that, we were going through wholly as a band, everything that everybody was going through wholly as like a collection of the universe, and it was, it was tough for a lot of different reasons, right? Like I lost my job of the last 10 years to the pandemic. And that just kind of sent me into a whirlwind. I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. It was a really scary point. And, ultimately it did open me up though that's when I started the guitar business, right? Like I made the best out of the situation. I started my guitar business and a lot of opportunities opened up. And that's kind of, in whole, I guess the theme of the record is like, sure, it hits you really hard at the beginning of the record with Welcome Oblivion. It's just really dark and like really ominous and just kind of hard hitting right from the get go. But then you see the light at the end of the tunnel, right? It's definitely like making the best of the situation.
With a progression of a record, it becomes a little lighter and definitely gives you that silver line on the horizon. Yeah.
So it was my story. It was also like the rest of the band's story as well, because every single band member went through a really difficult period of time, through that first bit of the pandemic, and it was like, lost family members. It was, just a collection of just really tough stuff to deal with. So it's all of the reflection and the mourning and like the grief, but then it's working through that and choosing the light at the end of the tunnel and working towards that light at the end of the tunnel until you finally like you're out, right? You reach it and we're good. Like everything you've recovered, you have that relief, and that's ultimately like in short, that's the theme of the record.
Which is definitely also audible.
Yeah.
So let's come to our quickfire questions. You get 2 alternatives to choose from. Tell us which one you choose and maybe a short explanation why. Let's start off with something easy. You come from Arizona. Meat Puppets or Jimmy Eat World?
Jimmy Eat World, hands down.
Let's make it a little bit more difficult. Godspeed You Black Emperor or Caspian?
Caspian. I love
if you
Godspeed.
could,
Caspian for sure.
If you could choose to record in an unusual space, would you rather record in a cavern or cave or in a forest?
Cavern.
Mm-hmm. You are throwing a party without post-rock. What do you rather listen to? Mariachis or a punk rock show?
Let's go mariachi. That sounds like a fun party.
For your next holidays, the mountains or the seaside?
That's it. Next vacation will be seaside.
Bob Dylan or Townes Van Zandt?
I'll go Dylan.
Robert De Niro or Al Pacino?
Oh, God. Pacino.
You have to choose between 2 kiddie universes that a lot of people love, and that you also probably love. Star Wars or the Marvel Cinematic Universe?
Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're like, yes, good answer.
No, I would have chosen Marvel because the last 6 Star Wars movies were just simply utter rubbish.
I agree with that. I do agree with that.
Twin Peaks or Stranger Things?
Twin Peaks.
I would agree with that. Last 2. What do you prefer, writing and recording or touring?
Writing and recording.
Because you don't have experience in the other.
I do. From previous, but touring is not my. I love getting out and playing shows, but the actual process of touring is not my favorite.
It's exhausting, right?
Yeah. It is.
Last one. Mogwai or Ranges?
I'm gonna go Mogwai.
I would do too.
Like,
So, Thomas, thanks for being on the show. Everybody, if you haven't listened to Synthesis yet, change that ASAP. And Thomas, thanks for being on the show.
thank you, man. I really appreciate you having us. Just really appreciate the opportunity.
You're welcome. Take care.
You too.